Hey everyone, this is Erica Lucas, your host and founding member of VEST, an organization connecting women across industries, regions, and career levels so that together we can expedite the pipeline of more women in positions of power and influence. Welcome to another episode of the Vester podcast, where we explore the invisible barriers holding women back in the workplace and share stories of women building power collectively.
I just want to normalize that, I think all of us are afraid at times. And I think as women, many of us prefer to please, to be liked, to avoid conflict. I'm not saying that's all we are, but I think a lot of us have been socialized that way. And so it can be easier to just avoid these things. For example, when I started to approach people about Voluntarios for Kamala, I realized it's okay for me to ask. It's okay for me to tell them and also say to them, if this is not of interest to you, that's A-okay. And just sort of normalizing that civic engagement is productive, respectful, even if not everyone agrees with our particular brand of it, that's all right.
When your various, identity privileges can help you be the person that's speaking up, or means that, you're not in a place to do that and want to step back. And that's in part why it's really important to have kind of coalitions and your close people that you're working with, because if there's a topic that is just really hits very close to home, and I'm not going to be able to have this conversation in a way that is, whatever, measured or something like that, then, someone else can step forward and take on that work.
It is different when you're earning, you own your own business. And so to Courtney's point about the privilege, I don't have a 2-year-old I have to feed and pay for to go to certain things. So maybe it's easier for me to take my risks.
My 2 older kids play soccer. I'm on the sidelines every week. And you hear so many conversations that are really close to being impactful. And you can feel the parents, and I think in particular the mothers, not say the one thing that would make this into a persuasive conversation for the sake of politeness, right? Keeping peace on the sideline. The husbands, the dads, don't always have that same filter.
In this episode, Andy Moore, founder of Let's Fix This and executive director of the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers, speaks to Mia Barros, founder of Voluntarios por Kamala, Blaire Postman, founder of Cat Ladies for Kamala, and Cortney Tunis, former executive director of Pantsuit Nation. In it, they discuss the fear many women experience around political engagement, strategies to overcome that fear, and the importance of stepping into political conversations, especially when others cannot. The conversation also highlights the significance of local elections and civic engagement, regardless of swing state status, and more. For our guests' full bios and show notes, go to www.vesther.co/podcast. If you enjoy the episode, share it with a friend and don't forget to leave us a review. This episode is brought to you by Vester Ventures, a peer network of professional women and investment fund for women-led companies in the care economy and future of work. To learn more, go to www.vesther.co. This episode was part of a more intimate coaching session with VEST members and has been repurposed to accommodate this episode.
Mia and Blaire, I'm going to start with you because it's about this election. We're witnessing something that is truly unprecedented, like a massive wave of volunteerism and community-led initiatives that are shaping the political landscape in ways that we haven't really seen before, and not least in a long time. A lot of these were built on the powerful groundwork laid by the Win with Black Women group. Could you each, Mia, maybe I'll have you go first, and then Blaire, can you tell us about how and why you decided to get involved?
Absolutely. Just want to say thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Erica, for inviting me. Thank you, Andy, for moderating. Thanks to the other panelists as well. Very excited to be here. So I'll just give you a little bit of the background story for Voluntarios por Kamala. We were founded to protect and empower Spanish-speaking voters. And of course, to help elect Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz. And the origin story of our group and why I wanted to do this goes back to 2020. I was a new mom, it was the pandemic, and I decided to volunteer on the Spanish side of the National Voter Assistance Hotline. And right after I joined in the first week of October, the hotline started to receive hundreds, if not thousands, of calls from voters in Spanish. And so I was getting emails that represented a voicemail like every minute of people that needed help. And as it turned out, those calls were coming from Florida, Arizona, Georgia, because voter registration was about to close in those states on October 5th. And that experience really left a mark on me, because by the time the team was able to get us all the voicemails and we were able to get back to everybody, we had to tell them they missed their deadline to register to vote for that election. And it really broke my heart, really for two reasons. The first is, how can we have a system in which millions of our fellow citizens don't have the tools they need to exercise their constitutional right to vote? Like, that just is wrong. And second, these are folks that wanted to vote. We didn't need to convince them. And they were calling a Democratic hotline. And unfortunately, I don't know what else to conclude except that the message they probably took away was that no one cared enough to be there to help them or call them back in time so that they could vote in the election. So this year, in which the election, as all of us know, is just crucially important, as important as 2020, if not more, for all of our futures. And I think a year in which it's really become clear to everyone that the Latino vote is an extremely important part of our electorate and likely to be the decisive vote in our election. I just thought I at least want to try to make sure that doesn't happen again. So I spoke to my husband and took a bit of a leap and decided to focus on this for a certain period of time. And now, I'm excited to say that our volunteers, including the amazing Erica Lucas, will be supporting Spanish-speaking voters on the swing state hotlines, and also protecting the vote on the ground as poll monitors and poll observers, designated agents, and more. So that was kind of what really pushed me to get involved in that experience. And it's really exciting to see all the energy around getting involved this year. But that was my particular story.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Blaire?
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Erica and Andy and everyone at VEST. The first time I really volunteered in a substantial way for an election was in 2020. And, I try to keep this on the down low, but I'm a recovering lawyer. And I've been out of that business for way longer than I was ever in it. And in 2020, I signed up for, I think they called it voter assistance or election integrity. And I trained and went to Philadelphia. I was living in DC. I now live in Baltimore and work in DC. And went to Philadelphia and stayed at the polling station I was assigned to. Actually, I was like, "Are you sure? I haven't been a lawyer for like 20 years." And they're like, no, that's good. And, we had a lot of training and we were there on site in the unlikely event, honestly, that something really substantial happened. And at the very least, we were a person with a hotline number, to what they call the boiler room, who could level up real problems that couldn't be resolved on site. A lot of them are not necessarily malicious of intent. Sometimes it's a simple misunderstanding of human poll workers and voters who don't understand when you can cast a provisional ballot and what that means, and lots of other rules. And as we all know now, those rules are even more so lately, constantly in flux and changing all the time. So whatever they were back when I did this in 2020, I'm sure they're obsolete in some way now. And of course, I got my postcards and everything else. And that election, after a lot of, frankly, trauma and distress for a lot of us, I believe went the right way, thankfully, and we're better for it. But, and I had gotten my postcards and I'm like, I'll probably sign up for the voter thing again. And then, first of all, it was so exciting. I think we all have yet to fully comprehend the amazing happenstance of Joe Biden stepping aside and also endorsing Kamala Harris. And I think that's going to be something we're going to need some historical perspective on. But I was so excited when she came on board. And I was always looking to do more, because even though I haven't been in politics, I've been a little adjacent. I used to be a bureau speaker agent for former political and media people. This answer is way too long. I I didn't feel like I never felt like I was doing enough, but I didn't know how to get a handhold on it. And if JD Vance had been even slightly less of a total jerk and hadn't just been so openly, blatantly, and so comfortable being hostile towards women of every walk of life, but starting with these childless cat ladies. And I realized, I'm a childless cat lady by every definition of the word, but it's not about that. It's about othering people. And this is just an easy sort of bad joke way to get a toehold in of people being numbed to the othering of their other fellow citizens in this country and their rights and their importance and how we all have to take care of each other. And I got the URL that day and the Instagram the day that he stepped aside and endorsed Kamala Harris. And we've had some helpers along the way, but I'm largely a one-person show. And it's been, without getting into detail, this answer is already way too long. It has been the best thing I've ever been involved with because of the amazing people I've met. And I really believe we're going to win this election, even though I'm nervous. But somehow, even if we don't, I don't feel like I would totally lose faith anymore because of all these. I know that I'm not the only one, and I know that there are other people I'm with. So that's how we started. Sorry for the length.
That's great. I politics aside, I do think historically we'll look back on this election. Everyone who's here represents PR or comms in any way, and look at some like massive missteps on political messaging by certain individuals for sure. Courtney, a similar question for you. You launched Pantsuit Nation in 2016, which is one of the largest communities for mobilizing millions to become more civically engaged. And later on, after joining forces, you became the head of activation for Supermajority. How have you seen the landscape evolve since 2016, in particular regarding women, female voters, and this unity call started by Win with Black Women and then followed by other women-led groups?
Well, it's been really interesting to not be with Pantsuit Nation or Supermajority right now, since 2020 and kind of watch everything happen. And what's most interesting to me is really the landscape is evolving in part because of all of the groundwork that was laid. So many grassroots groups came up in 2016 that started getting people more involved from, really more formal organizations like Run for Something that's actually bringing people in to run for office, to organizations like Pantsuit Nation, which were really about getting people to engage with each other and recognize their own power when it comes to civic engagement. And then once their kind of empathy for one another had really been cultivated, then take the step to actually do the work that makes our country better for, our neighbors and ourselves. And so some of what, was necessary, it's funny to see some of the parallels. So for example, Pantsuit Nation blew up over the course of 2 weeks, went from 0 people to roughly 3 million people in about 2 weeks. And Facebook was scrambling to get everything in line, to figure it out. We had these amazing people that were just working almost 24/7 to stop the thing from crashing, to make sure that everything was working. And that exact same thing just happened with Zoom when when the size of the Win with Black Women call got so large that they needed to, react in real time and create these tools that are now, equipped to handle these extremely large organizing calls. And even organizing on Zoom was something that started for the 2020 election, bringing people together, doing trainings for, it was really, kind of a function of the pandemic, doing trainings for text banking or phone banking had to happen over Zoom. And so recognizing that this is a tool and then the tool really blowing up is pretty amazing to see. I think also the Roe decision really changed the way that women saw themselves reflected in what's happening on the national level. I think we all always knew that our, personal rights were at stake, but when that actually fell, the reality of that was, even for those of us who are tracking this, who are on the kind of side of the percentage of the population that keeps track of all of these things on a regular basis, it was still just an absolute gut punch. And so a lot of people began telling their stories. And this was really a key element of the Pantsuit Nation philosophy, that it's through storytelling that we really understand what is at stake when it comes to these issues. And, at the DNC, you saw all of those women and their, male counterparts telling their stories about reproductive issues. And that's the way that we really understand what's at stake. And so there's that storytelling kind of through line, and then Roe coming down, I think really encouraged more women to see themselves in the reality of this election. And the final thing I'll say is, one thing I think is really important and what's really exciting when something like Cat Ladies for Kamala starts or Voluntarios for Kamala is that Win with Black Women had been having that call for years. I mean, I think 8 years or something. And so they were ready. When the time came, all of that infrastructure was there. And what they needed was just to have more people come and more people care and be part of it, and the invitation go out to more people. So each of these organizations that starts, if it's even just with an Instagram account or a Facebook group or, a text message among friends, you never know what's going to be the next catalyst for what we now see is all of these organizations that have raised so much money, that have engaged all of these people. So I think, if there's a lesson in all of this, and this speaks actually to what you were talking about, Blaire, no matter the outcome, there's a sense of kind of hope that's there, that's a little bit different, even as it feels like, extra important that the election, doesn't go in a Trump direction, that people know how to organize. The average person knows how to organize in a different way than they did before. And there's a sense of organization sort of coming to your door rather than you needing to go out and find it, that I think is empowering a lot of people to become more active for the first time.
That's great. Also, Courtney didn't know, but she was an excellent segue into what I'm going to ask next. Because what I kind of heard all of you saying is there's two levels here. Like in your stories, there's the raising awareness, gaining awareness of the public. But then what do you do with that? How do you organize that? Because if you just have a lot of followers, you're just a meme account, right? The magic is how do we create opportunities for engagement and for action at the individual level? And so on the survey that Erica read earlier, it said that 67% of VEST members shared that they still get most of their political news from traditional media and then social media, podcasts, online stuff kind of going on down. And this strikes me as one of those big shifts where even 8 years ago, even 4 years ago, the way in which Americans received information and from whom has shifted, in some cases majorly, some cases maybe just a minor shift, but we are much more based in like information silos now. And so how do you all, and this is open to anybody, but how do you see the roles of traditional media and non-traditional media evolving this year as compared to 2020 or 2016?
I am certainly the newbie of these group of experts. And just to reiterate, Win with Black Women leads all of us to this day through the election, through hopefully many years to come. So just wanted to make sure everyone understood how that being on those calls every week for 8 years really made the rest of us possible, because I am learning every single day what to do. And what really struck me, Andy, is I say this all the time. we have a lot of followers. We have more followers than some of these grassroots groups. And what I've told people is that if we don't get people actually taking action, it's meaningless. It's meaningless. And so, for example, I can't even name all the different grassroots and affinity groups who have helped us in addition to Women with Black Women. But for example, we are going to be doing a caravan as they call them, to Pennsylvania to meet cat ladies there weekend after this for 2 days of canvassing in York County, Pennsylvania. Everyone's welcome. And you can go to their website and sign up for different swing states, different shifts, different dates. We are doing phone banking every week. We had to learn how to do these things. We had to get help from other people. And when it comes to the information silos, I think the best thing that a group like ours can do that has sort of this wide, but maybe not deep reach with our followers, not yet, is to encourage them to learn with us. So for example, I try to regularly express in our different posts and videos and emails that, look, I'm going to do this phone bank. When I did my first phone bank 2 weeks ago, here's what I learned. Here's what I was scared of. Here's what's not scary about it, as scary as you might think. Don't want to do our thing? Here's a list of our website of like 20 other things you can do with other groups. You don't have to do our thing. Let me introduce you to these other groups, or maybe someplace that has I'm one person. I'm in the Mid-Atlantic. I'm not going to be in person at a Nevada canvassing group. Here's maybe some people you can get in touch with there. Learn with us, but also don't take that fact that you don't know everything as a hindrance, because the truth is most people have to learn this by doing it. And I think getting that information, my day job is in traditional and streaming media. I work for a large media company in advertising, and you have to be everywhere, sort of, in one way or another. And one of the ways that the different grassroots groups can help is some of these groups, the Geeks for Hairs, are great on Twitch. I'm not going to be on Twitch, guys. It's probably not going to happen. I mean, not in a meaningful way in the next 2 weeks. You know what I'm saying? So I'm jumping on something with them, and they're going to be on Twitch, and they're going to do all the work, and I'm going to say hi or whatever. And I'm not going to be able to execute everything, but I'm going to do a few things as well as we can with our resources, and then I'm going to either push our cat ladies who are interested in other things than what we're giving to other places, other resources, or I'm going to hop on with other people who are going to help me get my word out through other channels. But you have to be, it's very fragmented, and you kind of got to be everywhere, but you can't do it by yourself.
Courtney or Mia, how do you see the roles of traditional media and newer media shifting this year?
I think a lot of what Blaire was just saying resonated with me. I think it's really interesting seeing. So, you mentioned Twitch, Blaire. I was thinking about TikTok and how there are people there that are speaking in plain language and explaining things to people that, this is what this means. The news is reporting on this. Here's what that means. Or, have you heard this story? I'm going to do like a 5-part video on it. And it becomes almost like a long form version of understanding what's happening in the world. I'm not I'm very skeptical also of like all social media because of its potential ills. But that says the woman who, ran a giant Facebook group. But what is so interesting to me is, again, it's about meeting people where they are. And it's about getting people, getting the information in front of people. And maybe that is through, the Call Her Daddy podcast, for example, was a place where a lot of people just are. And now Kamala Harris is there. And if you're on TikTok and you're scrolling, you're going to find these people that are talking about various issues. And I think it's a really interesting combination. And I think that there are some really strong creators out there that they themselves are doing a really good mix of bringing in traditional media, introducing the story, breaking it down, that kind of thing. So I think that is really good. On the other hand, there's a lot of crazies and a lot of people that don't know what they're talking about, and a lot of misinformation that's coming from a similar place. And I do think that the responsibility of the platforms to be giving people the knowledge to know, like, this is AI created, this is a refuted topic, here's some other articles about that, all of that technology that helps you understand and kind of know how to consume media in a more intelligent way, I think is really important. And that's sort of a really big learning curve that we're all going through right now with the changes in technology that is going to continue to evolve the way that we interact with traditional versus non-traditional media.
I have a friend that works in traditional media as a TV journalist here in Oklahoma and then Detroit, Boston. And he recently got laid off and did what anybody does, where he started a podcast and a Substack and is now doing his own thing. But he relies on legacy media as it is to report news, and then he like synthesizes that and does his own little nugget. And I trust him. I think it's great. But he and I have had the conversation of, if you grow this, you will become the trusted source. People won't even, you'll be disconnected from, or the reader, the listener will be disconnected from the original source. And while I may trust him, there's thousands of other people doing that, right? And that's what you said, Courtney, is that suddenly the opportunity for disinformation or even just like spin that might be subtle at first can quickly spin out of control. And I think that gives a lot of people some pause. And all of this kind of goes in together with, heightened polarization, sometimes talking about politics, being perceived as political can feel dangerous or contentious. The news last week about an individual being a plot being foiled for a mass shooting on election day. A guy from here in Oklahoma has made it hit home, I think, for a lot of us. And certainly for many women, including those in the vest community, worry about political retribution and how it might impact their business or their spouse's business or their kids at school or any number of things. So this is really a question for anybody or everybody there. But how do we combat that? How do we foster healthy, productive political conversations? Or, I feel like there's a difference between political conversations and conversations about politics sometimes, right? Like it's a tent issue, especially with folks who might hold different viewpoints. What advice do you have for the audience?
So this is a really difficult topic and certainly not something that I think maybe we're going to solve in this moment here. But what I will say is that I think it really comes down to your individual decision about how you're going to move in the world when this happens. And that, I think each of us is aware of the way that one person's energy can either escalate or de-escalate a situation. And you can choose to be the de-escalating energy, even if you're angry, even if you're, insulted. And I'm saying this, I don't always do this. So there's times when I am like, no, this is a line in the sand. I'm not going to give you grace. But it is about individual energy. And one thing I think is really interesting to have as an example right now is the Liz Cheney, Kamala Harris interactions and conversations, that these are two people who are really on opposite sides of the political conversation, but have decided, like, we're not just being cordial, we are actually coming together and standing on our common ground. And this is what it looks like to have those conversations in a essentially civil way, that this is not about like slinging insults back and forth at each other. This isn't about, being a sort of a lightning rod for, I don't know, memeing or something. This is about standing in front of people, recognizing that we're on different sides of the spectrum, but this is the way that we've come together. And I think that that's just a really important visual that we have right now as compared to what we're seeing in a lot of other places. But when it comes down to it, a lot of it is about individual decision making in those moments when things get heated. And that's difficult because sometimes sometimes it's not, you shouldn't have to be the person that is the bigger person. And you can make your own decision about it. But when it comes down to it, I really think it's about a individual decision.
And if I could just piggyback on Courtney, I think the Liz Cheney, Kamala Harris visual and reality is exactly perfect. And, Kamala Harris, I'm going to not get this quote exactly right, but talks about, I may learn and evolve, in my understanding of issues and details and life experiences that other people have that I don't have, which is why they may think differently than me, but I'm not going to compromise my values. And it is an individual thing. I work for a big company that works with other people from big companies, and I can't always say the first thing that comes to my mind in some conversations, but I also keep in mind what my own values are. And I'm not going to, in my discussions, I can have appropriately polite, convivial discussions with people who think differently. But I want to make sure I'm not compromising my values in that process, whatever that means for me personally. And I don't personally believe that's going to interfere with my work. But if I'm prepared, and I had to be prepared when I took on this more public-ish role with the cat ladies, is that if I feel like I am acting appropriately in the space, and someone just finds out that I do this and they don't like it, well, that's not something I don't feel that's inappropriate. And so I just, I try to always be understanding and open-minded and convivial but I am not going to compromise my values.
I just want to normalize that, I think all of us are afraid at times. And I think as women, many of us prefer to please, to be liked, to avoid conflict. I'm not saying that's all we are, but I think a lot of us have been socialized that way. And so it can be easier to just avoid these things. So for me in doing this work, some of it has just been trying to really go back to what matters to me and be a little bit brave about it, like the same way I would tell my daughter. Believing that this is right, believing in the urgency. And then I've found that over time, I've become more and more afraid of engaging in respectful discourse. And that's bad. And we have to move away from that. And so, for example, when I started to approach people about Voluntarios for Kamala, I realized it's okay for me to ask. It's okay for me to tell them. And also say to them, if this is not of interest to you, that's A-okay. And just sort of normalizing that civic engagement is productive, respectful, even if not everyone agrees with our particular brand of it, that's all right. And talking about these issues has become so taboo, and it's really dangerous that it's become so taboo. I think just trying to get a little bit more comfortable with doing it in a respectful way, of course, not violating your values. That is obviously not good. But also, like we heard about Liz Cheney and Kamala Harris, trying to find points in common with folks who do see things differently, so that even if we disagree, it's in a way that still can feel productive. We're connecting as humans. We're being, we're humanizing the other. We're being social with the other. It's not easy, and it is very scary. But I think sometimes these interactions can go better than we expect, if we can put the fear a little bit to the side. But I'm not saying in any way that it's easy.
I think there's also a piece here about when your various identity privileges can help you be the person that's speaking up, or means that you're not in a place to do that and want to step back. And that that's in part why it's really important to have kind of coalitions and your close people that you're working with, because if there's a topic that is just really hits very close to home, and I'm not going to be able to have this conversation in a way that is, whatever, measured or something like that, then, someone else can step forward and take on that work. And that's actually a lot of what we would do in Pantsuit Nation when it comes to moderation, that, if hey, are you okay in there? Like, do you need any help? What can I do with, like, how can I support you? And sometimes, it would just be like, today is not the day for me to, get in there and talk about something that's really difficult for me to engage with that, on a personal level. So I think there's a piece too about recognizing when you are the person with the privilege and can step in and be the voice that is more moderated, but bring that other person into the room with you and make sure that their needs, their rights, all of that is represented. I think that's a really key thing, and something that it's something that you sort of have to practice doing, like reminding yourself, when you have power, when your power is compromised, and when to use it.
And I've just said, just to acknowledge, jumping over into the chat a little bit. And yeah, it is different when you're earning, you own your own business. Or when I now live in Baltimore, I work in DC. I have a base pay that goes along with my position. That is very different than the 8 years I spent in a very small city in southeastern North Carolina doing the same work, where I worked at 100% commission and had to go out and talk to very local business owners in the greater Wilmington, North Carolina area. And, 10, 12, 14 years ago. And it is different. And so to Courtney's point about the privilege, that's true. That's real. For example, you joke about childless cat ladies. I don't have a 2-year-old I have to feed and pay for to go to certain things. So maybe it's easier for me to take my risks. And, I now do have a position where I'm not on we all have things we have to do to earn our pay, but it's not the same thing as literally where I used to work. They called it, you only eat what you kill. But the fact that now I have this position is it became this year, but starting in 2020 in particular, it became to feel for me in the position that I had, frankly, irresponsible, possibly immoral. And I was a former philosophy major, so forgive me, and possibly immoral for me to not take advantage, to not give everything I could give, because there were so many people who were not in the position, who were going to be in a position where they might feel more retribution, where they might feel more danger to their personal, economic, and family security, or their personal well-being, their physical security. So I just want to acknowledge everything going in the chat, and Courtney too, because it's real. It's real.
Yeah, thanks.
Totally
I love
agree.
the energy around this answer. And I have a similar experience that I'll share real quickly, and then we're getting close on time. But my 2 older kids play soccer. I'm on the sidelines every week. And you hear so many conversations that are really close to being impactful, and you can feel the parents, and I think in particular the mothers, not say the one thing that would make this into a persuasive conversation for the sake of politeness, right? Keeping peace on the sideline. The husbands, the dads, don't always have that same filter. They'll stand off to the side and watch a football game on their phone. And just observing it, the dynamics there is interesting. And I think I'm very sympathetic to the massive amount of emotions that everybody brings, in my experience, particularly women, to this election, and the issues that affect their household that you may feel unable to fully express. My wife, I know, will go to the car and scream by herself sometimes just to get it out, because she can't say the thing out loud she really wants to. And so I think really excellent feedback on tactics and ways to create that space when necessary. So we've got, we'll say, like 7 minutes left, I think. And I want to make sure that we have some time to talk about local stuff, right? We talk a lot about the presidential election. It certainly captivates the headlines in the media. But all of us have the opportunity to think and act locally in places like Oklahoma, where we're not a swing state and we might feel left out. There are still ways that we can be involved. And so to each of you, what strategies would you recommend, and how would you highlight the importance of like state and local elections, maybe in contrast those national things, and how can VEST members take action in their community? And go ahead, Blaire.
I'm just going to say I'm not the expert, but I'd say, boy, we've all learned how important your state legislators are in dealing with things like women's health care, voting rights, even how they're implementing sometimes, funds that they could or get from the federal government. And when you're in a state that's not a purple state or, not a competitive state, primaries, your primaries are really important. That's what comes to mind for me. But vote the best that you have, vote every time. And even if you don't think any of your choices are perfect.
Thank you. Mia, I think you were going to chime in.
Local elections are super important for the reasons that Blaire just said. I think another thing to keep in mind is that, many of our national leaders were local leaders. Barack Obama was a state senator. Kamala Harris was a district attorney. Tim Walz was a local organizer for his hometown for John Kerry and then became a representative in Congress. So, by voting now, by investing in local politicians now, you are helping to create the leaders of the future, and you're helping them to build the skills to become the kinds of leaders that we want for all of us at a national scale. So there's there's many, many ways in which local elections are crucially important, but that's another one that people don't always think about.
I would also add that so Ballot Ready is a really great resource to prepare for voting. And part of what I really love about it is that you can see where the people who represent you stand on various issues. And it means that it gives you a better understanding of what the heck you're voting for in these down ballot races. And I know that for many years I went into the voting booth like, who is this? And I'm just like, yeah, I'm also from Massachusetts, so it's a little bit, sometimes there's just one name and it has a D next to it, and you're like, okay, vote for that person. But every once in a while there is an actual, important difference between how people feel about specific subjects that you care about in your local election. And I find Ballot Ready a really useful place to just get to, what have they said about this? What are their points about this? What's on their website about this? So that is, I think, that's a resource that I share pretty often with people when they say, I don't really know what's going on in my state. Because I think, my goodness, our state website's like so archaic and difficult to navigate. And like all that they want is just like, I don't know. I just feel like I go there to pay a parking ticket or something, but that is really helpful. The other thing is that, again, because the pandemic kind of created all of these different opportunities that allow us to connect with people outside of our state without leaving our homes, that, phone banking is something that you can do no matter where you are, and you can call in to different states. I know that I'm, sending vote forward letters into swing states from, my little blue Massachusetts. And so there are more ways that people have created who recognize that this is a difficult situation that a lot of the country finds themselves in, where they feel like it's not enough for me to just vote because I know the way that my state is going to go. The other thing that I think is interesting is that over the course of certainly my lifetime, we've seen states move from, red states to purple states, states become swing states become, entrenched in one color. And so kind of flexing your muscles and being ready when your state might suddenly actually be in play, or there's an important seat in your state that's in play, is, I think, just an important thing to keep in the back of your mind, that like, I'm not doing this. It's not a useless thing to engage in these civic practices, because it could be on my doorstep, in the next election.
Could I just add one other thing that I thought of? I just want to advocate. I just want to say that I think as women, we're just constantly feeling like we're not doing enough. We aren't enough, and that can make us avoid things at times because we just get overwhelmed. And I just want to emphasize that 1 hour is enough. In 1 hour, you can phone bank. In 1 hour, you can do a boot camp about best practices for advocating and promoting on social media. You can also recruit, 5 volunteers in 1 hour. So I think for all of us, we're constantly feeling that pressure. Like we have to remind ourselves that we can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And, if we can put aside the self-judgment and sort of trust that anything we contribute is positive, we're making things better. We have more room and more space to just do even just a small amount that we can do. Because many of us are in seasons of our lives where that's all we can do, a small amount, but that's still amazing. And so I just wanted to add that in really quickly.
If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and don't forget to leave us a review. And if you're ready to take your career to the next level, apply to join our community of professional women, all eager to help you get there and stay there. Go to www.besther.co and apply today.